We had a lot of support for planting more trees. And then there was some opposition on doing any more solar systems, especially for individual neighborhoods and schools. I'm sorry. Some of the other ones we had support for was city supporting projects to clean up neglected areas was another one. The workforce development area and just public pieces, we found that showing data online for energy and environment efforts, they strongly supported, and we do plan that as we move forward within our CPRG projects. And then there was opposition to publicly funded programs to incentivize businesses to be more energy efficient. Overall, some of the places that we found that were very neutral across the board were, there was a lot of support, strong support, opposition, neutral were new trails to connect parks and neighborhoods and schools, new and accessible bus stops and shelters, neighborhoods designed to be more walkable and reduce driving, continue to invest in CNG for city vehicles, adding bike lanes and sidewalks, using smart meters to detect water leaks, and neighborhood groups that clean or improve public green spaces.
So that was neutral, meaning?
Neutral. So again, if you look at it, we had a lot more within those that it was kind of an array. One was an array, or you had quite a few that were just very neutral in it in general.
Just kind of in the middle.
Just kind of in the middle. And again, you had a lot of folks that probably selected neutral, but you probably had some of the participants that selected support, strong support, but on the other side, oppose or strongly oppose. So kind of the key takeaways that we took from the public input and the survey, energy, working to lower energy uses of public buildings is still something that's very strongly supported within the city. And I think that goes within making sure that a lot of our rates and things like that stay down. Support for curbside recycling was basically a question, do you participate? And we had a large group, even in folks throughout that, said they do participate in our program.
Does that match? That doesn't seem to match our recycling numbers, though, does it?
No, but again, it's a sample size of, you're looking at 363, but of those, you may have folks that were
probably have a group that's very interested in recycling.
Well, you could, but again, even some of the ones that we had that were strongly opposed, I think we had a pretty good array of all the other topics, but it was interesting to see that most of the participants in the survey stated that they did participate in our recycling program. Use of local plants in public spaces, invest in parks that reduce flooding. Another one was using technology to improve traffic flow. I know that Maker's already doing that. It's more so on the signal piece, but it does help with reducing idling, which is good for the air. Plant more trees and preserve our natural areas. And there's still strong support for making sure that we're sharing data and performance within these programs. On the survey, here's kind of a holistic overview of some of the comments that we kind of put and summarized that we saw more of a trend on. Investing and addressing old infrastructure. For example, our water, sewer, and sidewalks. And we, especially in a public meeting, we did have some, big conversations, some really good conversations, but an overwhelming concern about, creating, basically investing or doing grants for new infrastructure and where they're wanting us to really address our current infrastructure. Be good stewards of our city resources and tax dollars. And we had advocacy for help for the unhoused individuals and revitalization of dilapidated areas, public support for energy education programs and job opportunities for the youth, and then still calls for tree planting and shade infrastructure to mitigate heat. So after collecting a lot of the public input and then also doing a lot of research and things that we could do moving forward, one that really stuck out to myself that I think we could put into our plan that does hit a lot of different check boxes, one within this program, but also things that have been mentioned by the board and the public, is brownfields. And it is an EPA program that provides competitive grants and other revolving fund for brownfields. And brownfields, as you can see on the screen, examples include like former gas stations, auto repair shops, old warehouses, vacant lots, junkyards. So a lot of different places that are abandoned and have been for a while. And a lot of these have been sitting there. And a lot of these grants can help assess environmental pieces, but also give opportunities for how these properties could be reused. Right now, we have the Western Arkansas Planning and Development District that have received assessment grants from the EPA. And we have been talking and meeting, and the one thing that they can't do is after they've done their assessments is then go into the reuse, and where the city can step in is actually in the revolving fund piece or pass-through grants that could actually go to these property owners to help basically get these environmentally sound for reuse, even get them up to par. Let's say if they only have half the money to get an old manufacturing place to get up to sell, then we could do a grant to help with the other half. There's a lot of opportunities within this. It takes care of blight in certain areas that will help with property values that will go up. And it will also give us a chance to work with Wapatiti on a program that they're having a little bit of a difficulty getting off the ground. And I think a partnership with us on that piece and then taking it from there to help revitalize some of these properties could be beneficial. A lot of these are as well. I mean, even the buildings downtown can be a part of this program. Even some of the buildings on the list that we've identified there too, that we talk about reuse or, appraisals, they can also provide things that the city can do with those as well. I will say that when and again, kind of to Christina's, Mr. Director Casavas, her question about our grant, this year, the EPA announced $267 million in brownfield grants. Pine Bluff received $500,000 for assessment, and there were cities in Region 6 in Louisiana who received almost $4 to $5 million for redevelopment. And the one piece that does make me feel like this program through the EPA will stick through the new administration is even the quote from Lee Zeldin on the press release that states that EPA's brownfields programs demonstrates how environmental stewardship and economic prosperity complement each other. Under President Trump's leadership, the EPA is powering the great American comeback, ensuring our nation has cleaner air, land, and water while supporting sustainable growth and fiscal responsibility. So I think the grants and different things have just changed in the flows. I think this fits right into where we're required to do this plan, but then they have a wonderful program already in the EPA that they're pushing in this new administration.
If you don't mind me,
Yes, sir.
the board member, brownfield site, if you apply for the grant and get it, does the city have to own that piece of property, or is it still private person?
No, it doesn't have to be. And it can be a pass-through revolving, does not have to be a property that the city owns.
Because the two tanks over at Zero Street was a former brownfield site. And then we've mitigated it, and then we put the tanks on top. So that's the reason I'm mad.
Yeah, and there can be a lot of options to that. The city could, and in some case.
That's the two tanks on Zero Street, the two
At Jenny Landon.
Jenny Landon Zero. Yeah. It used to be a brownfield site, then we mitigated it, put tanks in the outfit. So, okay, just trying to think through that.
Yeah, there's a lot of options within that, just depending on the actual property itself and the assessment. Another program that we could do is called CPACE. It's a financing mechanism that that funnels through the city to help with local businesses do energy efficiency upgrades that maybe they don't have the upfront cost they would like to invest in because the ROI helps them down the road. But again, they just don't have the upfront cost. MetroPlan did this in their application for the CPRG and is doing the program through the Arkansas Advanced Energy Foundation. And I do feel like this would be a good program for us to look at as something as an option down the road. And again, it can be a pass-through the city. We would, just like MetroPlan did, we would contract a different entity to run the program. And then all of those, usually the repayments for these kind of upfront loans are repaid through special assessment on the property tax bill, and it would stay with the property if sold. And then the third option that I would like to recommend is just the urban and community forestry. I know that city of Fort Smith is a tree city, and I think that we can expand on that in different places to continue to, again, be that city, but also utilize it in brownfields, brown sites, our trails, even the new developments and things like that, making sure that we're fostering that, and then also looking at city easements to where we can plant trees that are basically minimal to no maintenance. And again, if you look back at our survey results, we saw that in public comment. We saw that in the actual results of what do you support. And then in the public meetings, I mean, we saw that trees still something that a lot of our citizens would like to see for us to continue to do. And with that said, I mean, some of the current projects that we are doing that basically we can highlight in this plan that we're already doing is, again, the large-scale solar plants and the farmers market canopy solar. Again, with the CPRG, the public housing solar, the EV charging stations, and the alleyway rehabilitation. One thing I think doesn't get highlighted enough, is one thing that Lance doesn't get enough credit for, is our watershed management. And it was even mentioned tonight with that property. And it was something that Lance did back when he was in environment. And it was a program that he spearheaded to really make sure that we're doing our due diligence around our watersheds, that is our drinking water supply. And it's actually, I think we've been recognized for having one of the best water sources before it even reaches to the plant. And that's a lot to do with that watershed management. And he's still working on that. And that's something we can highlight and look for grant funding if we need to down the road. Again, our municipal facility energy efficiency, we're still working on that right now. And we will highlight that. The landfill methane capture, and then workforce development and public education is gearing up for the summer. Again, the potential projects to recommend would be the brownfield assessments and reuse. Right now, I think we're still waiting on the solid waste study, or the landfill study. Within that could be potential of a materials recycle facility, urban forestry, the CPACE program, and then industrial energy efficiency programs. And with that, with those recommendations, I will take feedback and direction on the plan.
Great, thank you. Any discussion? Record good.
Okay, first, let me thank you, Joshua, for the presentation and for your three recommendations for those three additional measures. Really interested in you said you called it CPACE? That's commercial property?
Yeah, it's commercial. Sorry, I did an acronym there and did put up the actual title of what the program is. Commercial property.
I think I did see it up there.
Yeah, I forgot what. Yeah, an assessment, and it's basically for commercial properties.
Okay, well, just taking some notes. And I had taken these earlier, and I recall you saying this very thing. Just to my fellow board members, moving forward with this plan, we definitely need to move forward with it, in my opinion. And it's a way for the city to start, shaping a broader sustainability plan. Right now with this presentation and with earlier presentations, we learned that this grant is a lot more than just climate and greenhouse gases, and efficiencies. It's blight eradication, it's economic development. It touches on possibilities like homelessness, economic development. I just mentioned increase our tree canopy, which I just learned might be a possibility. Community revitalization. I heard Director Settle speak to LED street lights reform be included, and there's a list of other things that we probably haven't even thought of yet. So I think this is absolutely a good thing that we need to move forward with and continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Not. Thank you.
Can we get that presentation, please?
Yes, Jeff wanted me to, after the meeting tonight, to provide the presentation and then also the survey results in its entirety to the board.
Yes, I would agree.
And the only thing I would add is that, we'll now, taking this feedback and direction, we'll be writing the plan, but we do want to bring it to a board meeting to approve this plan once drafted.
July the 15th, I think we hope to have.
I was just going to ask, are we going to need to make a motion to put that on there, or is that something administration is just going to do?
I do have to make a motion, right? To keep the distance.
Okay, so it'll be the 22nd. But yes, I mean, was there some revisit on the 15th at the study session, or was it intended to go?
Not unless the board, really, the plan was to present tonight, get the direction, draft the plan, bring it July 22nd for the board to approve, and then submit by August 1st.
I make a motion that we put it on the July 22nd session.
One second. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have another comment, Mayor.
Record good.
Thank you. Because of there are folks in the audience that have brought this up. This is another opportunity for us to look at this grant for our infrastructure needs. Not just new possible things that we can look into. And again, we know that the consent decree is off limits. They won't be able to touch anything like that. But it does give us an opportunity to look at current infrastructure needs. Of course, it would have to relate to this grant.
Okay. Thank you. This time we'll go to item number 3, which was put on the agenda by Director Settling. Rigo, Director Settling, will help comments.
Yeah, the third item tonight is a review of the establishment of a City of Fort Smith grants policy. Our Grants and Government Relations Coordinator, Chris Hoover, is here to introduce this item. Good evening.
I'll get it.
Speak right into it, Chris. Good evening. Is that better?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off with just a kind of a little preamble, and then we can get to the nitty-gritty. So, yes.
Okay.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to come before the Board of Directors this evening to discuss the establishment of a grants policy for the City of Fort Smith. Before I go any further in my remarks, I want to thank you, each of you, for the work that you do to help guide our city. I wanted to specifically thank Director Rigo and Director Settle for requesting the establishment of this policy. Additionally, I would like to thank Acting City Administrator Dingman and Deputy City Administrator Rice for the guidance when I had questions drafting this policy. When former City Administrator Gefkin was here, I approached him about a grants policy since we did not have one when I started this position in October of 2023. Unfortunately, my concerns were not heard, and since then, I've done my best to navigate the cities through the grants world, relying on the guidance of the AML Grants Council, the Uniform Grants Guidance put out through the Office of Management and Budget, and simply just drawing from my previous experience as a congressional staffer, having dealt with grant-related issues when they arose. The policy before you tonight is in no way, shape, or form complete. It is meant to serve as a foundation that can be built upon based on the guidance, advice, and direction from the board. There are obviously some priority considerations that should be expediently examined, addressed, and adopted to give city staff and departments guidance as funding opportunities arise. At the same time, there are also some items that need to be carefully considered prior to implementation because they have a unique set of circumstances that need to be addressed. An example of this is the federal regulations and rules that the community development and transit departments have to abide by to maintain their funding. It is important to know that although this grants policy should cover nearly all funding opportunities that arise, there may be a situation in which it does not, and we will have to deal with those on a case-by-case basis. Over the past several years, every municipality, county, state, and tribal government have been in a unique situation due to the amount of federal and state grant dollars that have been available stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent legislative packages that were created to help the economy recover. These include the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. It is a general rule of thumb that when the economy is strong, the grant dollars are scarce. But when the economy is weak, there are more grant dollars than you can see. The latter is the period in which we have found ourselves in since 2020. However, since the economy has mostly recovered and there has been a significant change within the political landscape via change in presidential administrations with new priorities, we now find ourselves on the downside of a once supportive funding environment. I'm afraid that this funding environment is only going to get more precarious due to proposed program cuts within the FY26 federal budget that is currently being worked on in Congress. In closing, I want to thank the board once again for the opportunity to construct this policy and trusting me to handle grants and government relations for the City of Fort Smith. I hope that the discussion tonight will be insightful, productive, and ultimately make Fort Smith stronger and more transparent. Thank you, and I stand for questions.
Right, so
I thank you, board. Thank you, Chris. Great job. It's very detailed. I like it. I do ask, a question. I want to kind of let the board, what requires a board approval?
Yes, sir.
So grants can be the required any type of match. I got to have a plan. Any the projects seeking funding that require construction, grants that require any type of partnership or somewhere agreement, grants that require any type of MOU, any grants seeking over 75,000, which I think is a good number, any grant that requires a policy change. So what would, give me an idea that would not, give me something that, is there something you can think of that grant could be asked for and then approved without board knowing?
Well, I think that, no. So I put that in there because I do think that this is going to cover everything, but the one time we will not have, there'll be that certain situation that comes up. And
So we just heard from Joshua that says tree policy, tree grants. So let's say there's a grant for $50,000 to plant trees.
okay,
That be covered in this?
I would say no, but planting trees could be considered construction. So then that's when the Parks Department come and
I mean, I think your point about Ken and Danny with the police and the transit, how you can fold those into here, because some of those are federal. They do certain grants, they do certain things. How do you do that with all the other types of grants that we have out there? So I'm good with what we got here as a good starting point, and as anything as policy, you can evolve it. We can make changes as necessary. So great start. I'm happy to start thinking.
Perfect. And Director Settle, I just want to make a comment too. I think, CBDG and Ken, Candace, they're excellent at what they do. You can ask Ken any question about a transit bus, a fuel cost, any small regulation within the FHWA, and he can answer that question. So we are truly blessed to have him. I think this policy was mainly to cover the gap that we had. And so with some of the situations that we have faced in the past, I think this will help mitigate those. And like I said, ultimately provide more transparency to the public and make Fort Smith stronger.
I'll let other directors comment, then I get on the question after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Christine Sage.
Grants can be used for anything. Transit, roads, construction, repair, street safety. Got a list here. Water, wastewater system upgrades, cybersecurity improvements, job training, emergency response training, police and fire equipment. So with that in mind, I think about we've got a strategic planning session that'll be this year. Should we try to move that up a little bit where we can align some of these priorities with grant cycles or congressionally directed spending? Because some of these funding sources require clear and unified priorities. So before our budget process begins, I think it would be nice to identify our priorities, see if there's funding, either federal or state or private things that we can look into, and know that going into our budget process. Chris, a lot of people don't know a lot about how congressionally directed spending works. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and if we've received anything like that in the past?
Yes, ma'am. So actually, it's funny, I brought my CDS and earmark book basically. But earmarks are basically a request. So requests that you can put into your member of Congress. Not every Congressperson participates. For us, Congressman Womack and Senator Bozeman do participate in that process. So basically, it is putting in a request to their office. There are guidelines based on what the Senate Appropriations Committee and then the House Appropriations Committee want. And then also it goes from year to year as to how much you can apply for. So actually in 2020, yes, in FY24, earmarks are capped at 0.5% of discretionary spending within the budget. So, and that can fluctuate, but for FY24, it went down. The year prior, it was 1%. Now, I will say, in 2021, earmarks will return after a 10-year moratorium. I think we're all familiar with the Bridge to Nowhere that was in Alaska, and that really put, a lot of members stepped back and said, hey, we're just wasting too much money on these projects. But let it be to Congress, they decided to come back with that. Senator Cotton does not participate, but essentially a request has to fall into a specific program. So it doesn't mean that we can just say, hey, Senator Bozeman, we want, this is just an example, but it's not that we can say, hey, Senator Bozeman, we want $5 million for an animal shelter, because there may not be that program available. It has to funnel through a specific grant program that's already established. And you have to have an agency to administer it as well. And so last year, and I don't know what we received prior to my coming year, but I know, let me just go through this real quick. So in FY24, we were awarded 2 CDS grants. These were both through Senator Bozeman's office. And I'll delineate. CDS is congressionally directed spending. That is through the Senate. And community project funding is through the House. So for FY24, we were awarded $2.5 million, I believe, for improvements, National Guard traffic improvement enhancements in front of the base. We were awarded another $12 million from the EPA through the EPA for the Fort Smith Water Transmission Line Construction Project Section 3. Last year, requests were put in. One was for Water Transmission Line Section 4, and then also the Mazard Reclamation Facility Phase 1. Unfortunately, with FY25, it basically just Congress, they just didn't get to an agreement. And so all the FY25 requests are now being merged with FY26, but they're not merging FY25 and 26. Some members of Congress are saying, okay, those who weren't awarded in FY25, we're going to choose those for FY26. Then other members are saying, well, we're just going to have a whole new slate, so even if you applied and were awarded, then you have to reapply. We were not considered for the phase 1 of the Mazard Reclamation Facility, but we did.
Do we know why?
I do not.
Okay.
It just didn't make it through committee.
Because that $12 million for the water transmission line's huge.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Lance and I have been working with EPA, and they've been wonderful. We're having to do status quarterly reports, and we have to get through a specific process and studies before we can actually submit an application to get the money flowing. We did receive, we put in for a $20 million request for the Water Transmission Line Section 4. We received $8.5 million, but then we ended up not receiving that because none of the projects were funded. And then for this year, we put in a $5 million request through Senator Bozeman's office for the Consolidated 911 Center. Unfortunately, I got news yesterday that Senator Bozeman did not want to carry forward our request. Part of me believes that it's because, and I can lead into this later on, but essentially we had a very high ask amount, and they also had to go through other requests from last year that they had to consider, and I think that's why. But, that doesn't mean that we can't put in for that next year, but I know that may be a little bit too late for the timeline that we have with the PSEP, and I can have either Administrator Dingman or Chief Baker speak to that. But then also for this year, we submitted for, I believe it was, I have it. I don't know where it's at, but I have it.
So what do you need from the board? Do you need us, outlining our priorities? Is that helpful? I know for me, going after some of these, water treatment or wastewater improvements is high priority for me. Is that helpful to you to, for us to kind of set priorities?
It is. I'm going to retract just a little bit. I wanted to mention, there are a limited amount of projects that each member can apply for. Obviously, the senators can apply for a lot more. House members cannot because they have smaller districts. But I did discover that the airport actually put in 2 requests to Senator Bozeman's office. And I was not aware of that. And I think that may have hurt the city's chances. And so I know that the airport is a little funky in the oversight. I'm still certainly up because I don't really understand how that works with the board. But I think if we're going to incorporate a process for especially earmarks, in order to make sure that the air board gets something that the board is not aware of or vice versa, then there needs to be a built-in process. I think too, some of the congressionally directed spending and then committee to project funding requests do require a match, but it also depends on what program it goes into. So I think being able for the board to have that discussion prior to budget season, to say, hey, you know, Chris, we want you to see if this specific project will be able to be funded through a request. And then if it is, during budget season, y'all can go ahead and allocate that percentage to the department that it would go to. And then that way, when it does come earmark request time, and there's a very short timeline there, the application period is usually only open for 2 weeks, then we have the ability to say, yes, we have a project. The Parks Department or Streets Department or Utilities has the match ready. And then we are able to have our ducks in a row and have a strong grants, successful grants too. But I think too, after that is also then letting the congressional members know our priorities prior to submitting those requests. And I think that's where we need to have more of a established relationship, inviting them here, saying, hey, you know, the fire department just got a brand new maintenance facility. Why don't y'all come tour that? And while at it, you know, here's this other discussion. And I'll give you an example of something like that. That's actually going to come up here soon. You know, Chief Baker, the board purchased the property on Highway 271, the old Crane Kia property, I believe it was. And there's been the discussion about, okay, how can we fund that? Now, I think being able to bring Senator Bozeman and Congress will let down, have a tour of that facility and say, hey, we would like to have funding for this. This is our goal. This is what we want to see. How can we start talking 2 years, 1 year prior to a deadline or whatever it may be? And that will hopefully allow for fruitful conversations. So then if they see opportunities and they see our earmark requests come through, they'll be like, yep, we know for it's spent and we know that specific project, that's how things get funded. And I can say that just in having been a congressional staffer, that's how things work. On needs that I may need, I would say more of a management system would be nice. There, you know, transit, Candace with CDBG, they have their systems, but currently we don't have an active grants management system. My system is, you know, color-coded file folders and then my desktop, and that's it. And I think to make the life easier of not only me, but our departments, and then also the Natalie Durant, our grants administrator, it would be very welcome to have a more seamless way to access information and have that system. I would say too, you know, that the board last week, 2 weeks ago, allowed for us to submit the application to the Noise Mitigation Grant Program. You know, I know that one consult Taryn Judd, he's still working on the numbers as to how many homes that we may be able to supply. Supplies not how many homes we can serve. That's a much better word. Serve through that program. But you know, if we do, then let's say I'm just throwing a number out there, 300 homes. We're going to have agreements. We're going to have studies. We're going to have tests, and we're going to need a way to have all that and manage that. And when it's just me, myself, and I, that's a little difficult. But I'll say, you know, the departments have all been great to work with. The department has usually know what is needed.
Are you your own department?
Yes, I'm underneath administration.
Okay.
That gets me it's just me, myself, and I. So, good.
Thank you, Director Neil Martin, and then Director Kim.
One of the things that you and I talked about last week was related to the Walton Family Foundation.
Yes, sir.
And I think there were a couple of instances in the last couple months where something up in Northwest Arkansas was funded to the tune of $30+ million.
Yes, sir.
What do we need to do? What do we need to change to where we're not just necessarily going after grant dollars from the government, but some of these family foundations or private foundations.
So I'm just going to throw it out there. I think having the ability to have more resources to search for this money is critical. A lot of the foundations, you have federal and state pots of funding, and then you have a whole different world of foundations. And I wish that Director Rigo was here, because this is his cup of tea. He knows this foundation world. Simply, it's just more manpower to look for this money.
Right.
That's what it takes. But I think more importantly than that, it takes a relationship.
Right.
And I think that's the one thing that we're lacking. I can either focus in the office on being on grants.gov, trying to find funding, or trying to do Google searches of funding sources. But we can do that. But then, I think it's much more strategic for the city and for the citizens of Fort Smith if we have established relationships with these foundations that we know have a lot.
Right.
And I think that's what we have to focus on first,
Right.
before putting a spreadsheet in front of Walton Family No Foundation saying, "Hey, we know that y'all have $20 million."
Right.
I think that's really what it
Right.
is. But I think too, it's project identification too. It's like, and one thing we have to realize too, it's, when it comes to foundations, that is not taxpayer money. That is money that these corporations, these families have, and they want to have their fingerprints on.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So, I would say either having the ability to find that funding, maybe having some type of contract with a search firm that we can contract with would be helpful.
Yep.
But then I think too, it goes back to Director Casavas's point about what do I need? I think that would be very
Sure. One of the things I'll ask the board is, in 2024, probably the most contentious time that we had as a board was over these grant dollars and how we were applying for it. I mean, it was heated. We had a lot of people come out. A lot of people, it seemed to led to a lot of frustration. How do we mitigate that going forward?
I think the policy here, they really would mitigate that, because it would take board approval before it would move forward. So some of those grants were after the fact.
Meaning they didn't come to, we were already in the hopper before it ever came to us.
Policies proposing anything over $75,000 or anything that changes policies or construction or anything like that have to have
Okay.
board approval before he's applying.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yep.
So in the situation we got in last year where there were, Safe Streets for All, CPRG, there's a third one, I think, right in there, and at the same time.
I think that was the build race grant.
Right. That would have to come to us before we move forward with you going in that direction.
Absolutely.
I think
New policy.
Okay, and I agree with that. I think there were a lot of people that got caught off guard, and I think that's what led to the tension and the frustration around all that. So yes, I think that's good. I did notice, and that was one of my questions on page 8 or page 35 of our packet. I think that's where I saw if board of directors or resolution from the board of directors is required. And maybe I just missed the component that you were talking about, Director Settle, where all those things have to go to the board.
4.3B, subsection 2. Page 36, our packet, page 9 for its policy deads.
Okay, I see it.
With applications that meet any of these following criteria must.
Okay, no, I agree with that. I think it's important that the board, I'm a big believer in the legislature and making sure that the legislature is driving these priorities. And
Make that a C. C in there, department, 4.3C.
where you have all that components.
Structure, the rent structure, so that way we reference it.
But yeah, I'm a big believer in the legislature, and the legislature sets the direction, makes the laws, ordinances in our case, and so when those things don't go through us and maybe somebody else is driving them, I think that leads to where we were at last year, and I want to try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yes, sir. And Director Martin, I think you bring up a great point. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what money is out there for the consent decree wastewater work.
Yeah, right.
And the problem that the city has is that, honestly, we're too big. We're too big for these programs.
Population.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, a lot of these programs that you see through the USDA or the Arkansas Rural Development.
We're too big for some of those.
Yes.
So we're this close from getting others, correct? The 100,000 number is that threshold, correct? Below 100,000
Yeah, no, it depends on the program.
depends on the program.
Yes.
Because I know some in the past, some grants, if you're over 100,000, you can apply for other grants because your population.
And then, it's going to be interesting, Director Settle, is, right now, the Trump administration, you have this new administration coming in. Like I said, all these policies that were under the Biden administration that allowed for us to get some of these dollars is no longer there. And so you have an administration that is still establishing what they want to see. And it's, different from the first administration that they had. And so although the dollars are not really slowing, and there's still things that are lawsuits every day. You'll see, even today, the President Trump threatened to cut California's educational funding. And it's like, we're still in the dust settling period. Yep. And I think that there are going to be programs that come out. But I think from a legislative and a policy perspective, I think we have a great opportunity to say, hey, our city is in a consent decree because maybe there weren't those grant dollars available to larger municipalities like ours. Now, I think if we can take a solution to, either the state legislature or the Trump administration or legislature members and say, hey, the city is partially in the situation that we're in because this component wasn't there. I think that will only show us favor. But I think also it can maybe get us things that other cities didn't have. And maybe if we were a test pilot of some sort, if we said, hey, EPA, we want to be a test pilot if you have this program going on, or if you're thinking about this program, or this is this is a program that we've created that we think could be beneficial to municipalities and states throughout America, but let us be a test pilot, and you never know what can happen. All you have to do, I think, within the world of federal government and elected officials too, I used to not be scared of elected officials. I used to be scared of elected officials. I still am. But I have a much more favorable and comfortable time approaching because people think, oh, that's a board of a director. Oh, that's a mayor. But one of the things I discovered is that you just have to ask the elected officials. You have to ask the appointed officials and establish relationships with them. And that's how things can flow.
Director Kale.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say that I thank you for your work on this, and I would just say, Chris, I definitely would love for us to look into some sort of dashboard that's, even if it's a part of the website that's public facing, to just mirror the file retention that you have and access, because I think sometimes what can also help calm up the grant conversation is allowing people to easily access the NOFO documents, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And so that way there's no hidden thing at all. It's very fronted out there. It's public, it's accessible. Reporters that want to comment on it know how to go through and get some questions answered. And so I personally would just amen your request for some software look, but also thinking about public facing transparency. Question: will the past awards, specifically the $12 million water line, I know I got to ask Senator Bozeman myself when I was in D.C., and he was making us aware that that's going to be frozen. But when things are thawed, are we going to be able to receive that funding, or is that funding opportunity passed?
So that opportunity funding is still there. And Lance could correct me if I'm wrong, but when we have had our conversations with Roberta and the EPA Region 6 folks, things are flowing. We just gotta do our work in order to get these studies done that we have to do, and then they'll open up the application, and that's good. I think the CDS dollars and the CDS dollars and the community project funding dollars, I think those are okay. It's these other grant programs that are in a little bit of a peculiar situation. An example of that is, our Raise Grant Award. And really, it was all programs that were funded through the DOT under the Biden administration. There was an internal guidance memo that said, hey, we are going to do a review of every program, of every application, and if it doesn't match what the Trump administration wants to see, then those dollars are frozen. And so we're still waiting on some things, and unfortunately, that's the problem in the administration.
And I think also just debriefing post receiving of grants, work getting started,
Yes.
making sure that we do a good job telling the story about the effectiveness and the return that we do get from these grants along that story, and then having that kind of cataloged in a space.
Yes, sir.
Once again, that's public facing. I think those things can also potentially help us, perhaps with accessing, as Director Martin has talked about. The good question I thought he had is accessing private foundations. But I think if we can show that we steward well what we have and have really narrowed our priorities well, and what we get, we're, first class and premium with our care in the process and the communication of that, and we cheer on what those grants funded, then to me that has to help accessing other opportunities as well.
Yes, sir. And I would say, going back to, your mention of posting things on the website, and you specifically mentioned that there's a funding opportunity, I would only say that we should only post the NOFO once the board has approved a resolution for us to apply to that program. Just because there are hundreds of NOFOs that come out. I can take you to grants.gov right now and show you a lot of NOFOs that are not applicable to us because they are through the Department of Health and Human Services or the DOD or the Department of State. So I think posting that NOFO after
Yes.
that would be.
No, I agree definitely after. I just think when we talk about, when people say, well, there's strings attached, that was a phrase. Well, we know those. They're listed. And if we can comply with them and we think we can comply with them, great. If we think we can't comply with it, then you don't apply. So, there's, when you know that and you can present that and have it forward facing, I think it just helps the whole process.
Yes, sir. And I would say, too, it's not necessarily strings attached. It's terms and conditions. When each one of you has an iPhone, when you got that iPhone box, there was a little booklet in there with terms and conditions saying how you could or you could not use that device. And that's what this is. It's just making sure that we're going to do what we said we were going to do within the guidelines. That's all it is. And I will say, Director Martin, you made a specific comment. I want to say, when it comes to funding, partnerships are obviously important. And I think one thing we're uniquely positioned in is being not only on the Arkansas River, but being in Western Arkansas and on the border of Arkansas and Oklahoma. And I think, through the developing relationship that we have with the Choctaw Nation, soon to be the Cherokee Nation, but then also what we need to do is start reaching out to the state of Oklahoma. There are regional opportunities that I think can come from having developed relationships.
I think it also might be impactful. I've been thinking about this, is to meet maybe with that congressman that serves the Eastern District of Oklahoma.
So Congressman
we're in DC.
Yes, and then you also have Senator Mark Wayne Wallen and
Yep.
Senator Lightfoot. So
maybe we want to engage those guys when we're in there, when we're in DC.
yes, and I think that's great, beautiful point. And actually, Sarah Jane Cox, she's the government affairs person with the Choctaw Nation. We've actually spoken in length about what can be done to strengthen our relationships across the border. Because I think that's even when I started, I approached Administrator Yefka once again. I said, hey, where's our relationship with these people across the border? And and there is too, and I say this very lightly, there's travel money that they may be able to access, but they need a partner. And so I think it's just overall important that we have relationships wherever we go, and we need to be good neighbors and good stewards.
Right, I agree.
Thank you, Director Settle. I think you were next, Nick.
Yeah, just two things. You talked about a community grants management system.
Yes, sir.
I think that'd be a great opportunity to put that in next year's budget. Don't go for the one that has all the bells and whistles. Get something that's solid and works. That
Yes, sir.
Because
And I will say, so Ken Scabucci, myself, Andy, we are gonna look at some products that will fit all of us. And there may be something that CBDG doesn't like, and that's fine. There may be something Ken doesn't like. I will say there is the ability through some grant programs to use it for use some of your
grant dollars and make it for the
well, yes, but your indirect cost to pay for that grant program, and that's something I'm looking into right now, especially if we get this noise mitigation grant, and that would save obviously taxpayer dollars, and that's why I'm trying to be cognizant of as well.
And then the last thing I have is you talked about the airport and a grant that you didn't know about. So I'd like you to go back with this administration, maybe look at this policy. How do we add like the airport, the library, to give notification if they're putting in grants?
Yes.
The board has to approve them, but our board had to approve it if it's going to be above 75,000. Yeah, it's an airport grant or the library. Those entities that we don't have direct contact to, but we do because they're still at the end of the day. That's just something to think about. Maybe not the library. I think the library's on its own. What?
Close.
What?
Close to the mic.
I'm sorry. The airport, for sure, I think would be something that we should have attached to.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that, right now, and I could be wrong, but I think what they got the CDS grant for, or Senator Bozeman is pushing the request forward for consideration to the committee as a whole, or subcommittee, then it'll go to the full committee. I think it was going to be for a snowplow facility. I believe so. They had a second one for a fire truck because obviously that would help the FMS mission. I will say, I think there are going to be some grant opportunities that come once we get this mission installation resilience study done. And once we get that done, I think that there will be things that we can apply for that will help the city.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask for approval. I just sent notification to the team would be, that's all you're asking.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Nick, you need to submit to the
Yes. Well, if we think, we still have some work to do with the structure of it.
Yes.
I think about that to put it on a future agenda, but
July.
need to peg it.
Second meeting in July.
Is that good enough?
Sure. All right, is that too quick?
22nd.
Yeah, only second July.
Yeah, that should be good. And that should be good. I know that we're here.
I know.
Pending administration back needing more time.
I'm not sure. I like that.
Yeah.
I will tell the board, there are some grant opportunities that are.
Yeah, but as far as the policy, I just want to get policy.
Yes, I just want to make the board aware that there are some grant applications that are going to be coming before next week. I mean, specifically, there are 2 grants for the PD that I'm going to place on the consent agenda. There is going to be another probably opportunity with Arkansas Economic Development Commission. So, there are going to still be some things flowing just prior to.
Can you give us some information, a little more information about that via email, whatever?
Yes.
All right, I made a motion, second, then on future agenda.
Second.
Like you said, thank you.
Thank you so much.
This time we'll go to item 4. Thank you, Mayor. Item 4 this evening is a discussion relevant to the development of a wholesale wastewater agreement with the town of Arkoma. Some of our recent discussions have been around the rate charge to Arkoma for providing wastewater services, and some consternation of proposed rate increase to Arkoma. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to approach this from a cost standpoint in terms of identify the cost that we incur as the city in order to take and treat the wastewater from Arkoma, and to devise a rate that encompasses those costs. And so we have met a couple of times with Arkoma. They talked about the methodology that we're using. There's a little bit of a difference of opinion in there, and that's fine. That's healthy. Our friends from Arkoma are here to hear this discussion as well and participate. But I'm going to start off with Andy Richards.
Andy has devised a schedule. I'll let him explain what he's done. But in order to come up with a proposed rate for our coma. Now, the item, we are on a deadline a bit for evaluation of the agreement, but the basis of the agreement will settle back into the rate. I think, Colby is working on the language of the agreement, but the very important part is to determine on how we establish the rate that it is incorporated. And so with that bit of introduction, I'll introduce Andy Richards, our Chief Financial Officer.
I think Mr. Damon sent out the schedule that we prepared. Did y'all want a copy of that?
Let me see that. I just want to make sure it matches.
See, I want her copy. And if you would, speak into the microphone, get a little closer to your microphone. Just put it to you there. Okay. And if you got enough copies, just spread them around.
Been continuing to evaluate these costs. As like we said, we've been kind of short on time. We got this deadline coming up, but he asked us to come back and look at the.
Hey, Andy, get closer to your mic. Closer.
All right. Is that better?
Yes, sure.
All right. So I just went and pulled the numbers that I have. We prepare financials by between the water and sewer system. We have the allocation of certain costs. So this first step in this that I looked at was just what are the system-wide costs for sewer for the whole system, and just to devise that. And so, the first part includes everything. Even allocations of admin costs, operation services, interest on debt, and I estimated what the annual depreciation is on the system for the sewer system itself. And so, develop that, the annual cost to run the whole system is about $32.5 million a year. And then, if we look at, towards the bottom of that information that I sent out to you, I started looking at our, system-wide. We typically have a base charge for customers. I think I used $6 in this schedule, but realized that was a base charge for the water service. I think the new base charge for sewer that goes into effect is $4.66. So I've updated my numbers a little bit for that, but determined that we're going to get a certain amount of revenue for the base charge, and then also noted, the cost that I gather was for 2024 fiscal year, that we build system-wide about 3.5 million CCFs a year. And so by doing that, so basically it's, and that is, we bill the CCFs, 3.5 is what we read, right? It's not necessarily what runs through the system as a whole, what we treat at the plant, but we read the meters, the usage at the individual residences, the commercial businesses, industrial sites, what flows into the system from Arcoma. Most of the residents are based upon the water meter, the water usage, but some of our industrials are using the flow meter, as well as the Arcoma is using 3 flow meters. So that actually measures the sewer flow into the system. So that's something to think about there. But when I do when I take into account, how much revenue do I need? If I'm gonna bill 3.5 million CCFs, how much revenue do I need per CCF to cover the remaining net cost of the sewer system in total? And so by doing that, I basically back into what our current sewer rate is, 875. When I adjust the base rate back to the correct 466, it comes out to about 859, and then the 3.5% increase, it's 890. So it's very close. Got very close to what our established retail sewer rate is by doing that. So, I feel pretty comfortable by using the overall system cost to develop some type of rate based on that. So then I kind of went back up, and we treated. We built 3.5 million, that's approximately, but that's not what ends up in the plan is 9.7 million. So the difference of that is our infiltration and inflow, our I&I flowing through the system. There is some internal usage that we account for. It is very minimal in this whole determination. So I determined that, we're treating 9.7 million CCFs a year at $32.5 million. That's $3.36 per CCF.
I think that you were telling me that's the base charge. That's what it costs to treat a CCF is that $3.36.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the rate. That's what it costs. But that is the assumption we're basing that rate on what hits the plant. We're not going to we don't read people's usage at the plant. We read it back at the houses, at the businesses where the flow is. And so, the calculation that I did shows an I&I adjusted factor, basically an assumption of 39% I&I. But then I've reconciled that our I&I system-wide is actually 63%. So, the first question is, as far as developing a wholesale rate, do we charge our wholesale customer for the cost of dealing with our I&I that flows through our system? Now, want to clarify, they have their own I&I, they have their own infiltration and inflows as well. But we're measuring that. It's already included in the volume that we're getting. So, we don't have to worry about, we're measuring 20,000 CCFs, so they're actually, metering that. They're actually sending us, 122 because of their. So no matter what the condition of their system is, whether they've got large I&I issues or not, but the way I'm looking at these numbers, I don't think that makes any difference.
It still flows through our system.
Yeah, we know what we're getting from them.
Right.
So then the question is, do we want to charge them to add on this I&I factor? Conveyance, because it's got, because it's not like they don't pipe it straight to our plant. It goes through, it comes in 3 different places, flows through our conveyance lines, through our pump stations, a couple different pump stations down to P Street. So I've learned a lot from Lance about the last few days while we put this together. But so, this rate that I calculated, I accounted for that, this is a cost developed for 2024. So I also added on 3.5% for inflation or the 25 rate increase. And so that, that gets us to 567 per CCF, after I extrapolate the I&I. Also for outside customers, like was requested, we build in some return
Yeah, I requested the full 10% that state law permits.
Okay. I've calculated the 5 and 10% here that you want to do. But, so like I said, I think there's some other consideration is, the I&I factor at 63%, the rate is a lot higher. I went back and determined that. So at 63%, I basically have to extrapolate that $336
$2.10.
per CCFs at the plant by 271%. That gets you to $9.10.
Wait a second. What? Maybe you lost me there.
The I&I factor that's in the calculation that I did
Yeah.
is based upon 39% I&I.
Oh, I thought it was on 63 I&I.
Now, we added 63%. That's a correction that I needed to make. So
So that's not, it's not
a full 63%.
okay.
A full 63%, you'd tack on another 271% to that rate at the plant. So, and in essence, it's the same, we're basically getting back to the same numbers that we're charging ourselves, retail. Because we're trying to cover the same cost. The only difference is we're collecting base rates from our customers. So we're collecting about $1.8 million to a couple $1 million up front through the base charge and then charging a rate of $8.75. So they don't have a base charge. Do what?
Question I have is, why would we have a wholesale customer?
That's an excellent question that actually Mr. Dingman asked me this morning and really made me stop and pause as to what is the difference between a wholesale customer and a retail customer. Wholesale customer is normally an entity outside of the city that has its own governance and has its own collection system. But there are some other things that take into account. So we talked about I&I tonight, and Andy mentioned using the 39% as a calculation factor as opposed to 63. Well, 63% is a system-wide. So that includes Mass. Macomb does not transfer to Massart, and it's specific to P Street, and that actually is a higher I&I rate. So that's why we didn't take the 63 and divide it in half. They have a higher percentage. But one of the other factors, and this is, but I hope I'm not getting in trouble discussing some of what was discussed today, was, 336 number. They're actually metered, so we know exactly what we're getting from them. We know exactly what's coming. So why would we add in I&I? Because that's treat. If they had a pipe that went from their system directly to P Street, I could support the 336 to a point. The issue is, as it comes in, for those of you, in fact, all of you that were on the board except Director Kim, when we talked about water rates, one of the things that factor in is a peaking factor. You will remember residential has a higher peaking factor than an industrial rate or something like that. We have a peaking factor that occurs when we have high I&I, because that's when they're discharging high I&I to us as well. So to collect that fee, that's why Andy figuring the 39%, because it's only using P Street Basin instead of the whole basin, where we spread it out, for all the customers. You've got to look at that peaking factor. When they have high I&I, we have high I&I. That's what's stressing our pipes, pump stations, our EQ basin, and the plant. So if we do a wholesale rate, we have to have the I&I. Director Settle's point, and Director Mark what is the difference? The main difference in this talk is the fact that it is when we look at a retail rate, we're looking across the city, both Mazar Basin and Peace Street Basin. And we do that because we don't want to give, if it was cheaper to build in the Mazar Basin, then you're enticing industry to move and residential. So you try to keep it a level playing field throughout the entire city on the retail. That would be that's the only reason I can see, because they are not using the entire basin. Andy's work, I feel, is very sound and solid. The mistake I made in the original one was I did an entire basin calculation, and very grateful that we have a.
Whoops. The other thing I, just trying to think about, the differences. We're also collecting sewer from residential areas and residential lines, and then bringing them in. They're doing the same thing on their side for theirs. I looked at the budget that they had that was filed with the state of Oklahoma for 2025. And I'm estimating that there's sewer O&M was budgeted at about $226,000. I subtracted what we would have billed bills for sewer usage. That's just my estimate based on their numbers. But that comes out to about $1.84 per CCF that they're spending maintaining just regular operate.
$1.84. So you factored that.
Bang.
A dollar. What was $1? What?
$1.84.
Around 690.
691. Yeah. So
The 10%, which were allowed by state law, we could do.
you would think that in reality, 691 would be would that be a more accurate rate? Is that the right terminology? Or are you just you're just basing it on your numbers here in terms of what they're spending on maintenance of their system?
He's implying, I think, if I could, that's what they're going to need to charge to maintain above our rate to keep their system moving. Is if I understood that correct?
It's relevant in a number of ways, that information, I think. And how accurate my estimate is, it's not, I'm having to back in the certain things. I don't have their financials. I'm just taking the numbers that were available to me and but it's, does that mean, they're spending $1.84 collecting residential sewage that we don't have to do, that we do for but we would for our residents? Is their cost exact same as ours? No, but I think that's, I just thought maybe that's relevant.
Yeah, and that takes out the grant funding that they had. It's just their operation.
I didn't include. Yeah, that there's no capital or debt service in that.
Okay.
I mean, I've already said that I agree. I don't want to subsidize another municipal government. I'm also privy to this idea that in my head that I'm just thinking through. I want to treat others as I would want to be treated, and we are negotiating with the EPA and the DOJ, and I think there's a sense of responsibility that I wanted to have this discussion to make sure that we could go through the numbers. And I really just thank you, Andy, and Lance, thank you for y'all's time to dig into this, to give an opportunity for discussion about this instead of just going through. I like this plan. I don't know their specific, response to this. I don't know if they've even offered you have they even offered any sort of counter idea to this at all, or was it just? Can you speak to that at all, or have we heard anything back?
Well, I would say we met with them this morning, the two fellows that are here this evening, and Andy went through just like he did here. And of course, they have concerns. They have different ways that they would go through a methodology to determine a rate.
I did ask them, if they have something that they could present to us and walk through us, the same as we did with them, to show what justifies a rate from their perspective. And I think they tend to do so. We just met from this morning and the meeting again later this week. We've got things to accomplish here. So
are they here to talk to you? Are they here to?
I think they certainly.
I'd like to hear.
I think they certainly would if wanted to ask them to. And Mayor Joshua Johnson of Arcoma, Vice Mayor Bobby Weatherford are in.
I want to thank the board and the mayor again for your time. I want to thank Andy for the work he did on this calculations. It's a lot of thorough work, and with a couple of minor exceptions where I can't, I think I struggled in the same place that Director Martin did, getting to the I&I adjustment and making the math work for me as well. But that's it in my mind. That's a bit beside the point. I looked at these numbers, and one of the things that helped a lot in some concerns that the board has shared and that I had as well is, first and foremost, when we talk about subsidizing, we can look at different definitions of that, and I don't want to beleaguer that point, but to me, in very simple terms, I don't want it to cost money for Fort Smith to provide service to Arcoma, because that to me is bad business. And so when I look at the extensive work that they did, the operations services, the cost to actually, and please don't mishear me, I completely appreciate, because we have the same concerns, there is a significant amount of overhead. There are, projects that you have to fund. There are people that you have to pay. There are administration costs. There are development costs. There are so many costs that go into anything. And those are real costs. They're not make-believe. You have to fund those. I agree with that. But when I look at Arcoma as a customer of Fort Smith, not a citizen of Fort Smith, but an outside entity that is contracted or was contracted in service with the city of Fort Smith, the actual incremental cost, or the difference in cost for what it costs you guys to service us, meaning when the flow that we send out goes through your meter, or through your plant, rather, what it costs you to process that and return it to the system, that is your operation services cost there. That's line 4, I believe, which when you take that based on your total flow into the system, and that is, again, as Lance spoke to, there are some differentiation between P Street where we go and Mazard where we're not going, but taking the system in total, the operational cost itself for just treatment comes out to about $1.90 per CCF. Our current rate is $2.69 per CCF. So on its base, at the very basic level, we're paying more for what we're sending you than what it's costing you to treat it. Doesn't cover that. I'm not pretending that covers all the overhead, additional costs, anything else. As far as transmission, we are relatively close to P Street. I can appreciate that, to Director Settle's point, trying to geograph everybody and within town where they should be or how much they should pay based on transmission would be a logistical nightmare. That being said, our inflow for almost everything that we send you, we do have 3 meters, but I think there'd be no argument that, relatively speaking, we're talking about the U Street meter. That's where over 90% of our flow comes through. That's where our lift station goes to. That's, for all intents and purposes, that is our primary flow and the thing that we're dealing with. That travels about 2,000 feet to through gravity fed lines to your Mill Creek lift station, and then runs in a force main all the way from there to P Street. So somebody used an analogy of having a dedicated pipe, and while it's not our pipe, it's yours, we almost do have a dedicated pipe to that. All that being said, as I looked at those numbers and I looked at what you guys have published for what you can process on it, not your maximum capacity, but just your average daily process at the P Street plant, the one that we're sending everything to, and I looked at what we're sending you, I realized that the word that continued to come to my head is, for logistically, we're insignificant. We are to your total system, we provide a little over 1.2% of the total flow into your system. For the P Street plant specifically, our average monthly flow, you do more than that in a day, every day at that plant. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay for the service that we're providing, but I feel like we may have built a mountain out of a molehill. You know, you have a $32 million budget here that you have to make work, and I can appreciate that. We are, frankly, insignificant in that budget to the city of Fort Smith, but the decision that we make here will be critical to the citizens of Arcoma. And so I do want to come to an agreement. I do want to come to a resolution. I can tell you that, you know, based on the feedback that I'm getting here, I think the number that we would be prepared to propose is not going to match what Director Martin was looking at, what Director Settle is looking for sure, because I don't believe that financially, whether I agree with the thought or not, I don't believe that we can cover your fully allocated cost or an equal share of the fully allocated cost of your system and cover the cost of our system. We can argue about whether that's right or not. The argument really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we can't do that. What we can do is provide a rate that covers the cost of servicing Arcoma to make sure that you guys are made whole for providing our service. I think that, you know, we're doing that currently. I think that I'm not asking to maintain the rate that we have currently. I believe that, you know, just speaking for myself, I think that applying the 3.5% that was applied to your citizens and maintaining that annual step that you got in place for your citizens, those are more than fair requests that I would be happy to implement into a contract. But I can't start it at 623 or 595 or, you know, because we could argue about whether or not we owe that. And there are some, you know, you guys have made some good arguments. But as you pointed out more than once, we aren't citizens of Fort Smith. And if those are the rates that are insisted upon, as I've said before, we won't be able to fund that. So our options will be to, you know, seek an injunction until we can put in an alternate solution, which would be redirecting that flow to another source of ag capacity, trying to build a facility. Those are all going to take years. That means, you know, all of us sitting in court somewhere else. You guys don't want to be here seeing me anymore. We don't want, you know, I get that. Like I said, it's for you guys. You guys have a lot of other stuff to deal with, a lot of stuff that will move and sway your city. You have important jobs. We're talking about 1.27% of your inflow, and we've been here, you know, over and over to do that. And I'd like to come to an agreement that we can pay you and continue to be a customer for you. But if that's not the pleasure of the board, if we can't come to a number that's like that, then we'll you know, move to Plan B. And I don't know, there is no good Plan B, but it's not pay 875.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Could you, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at these numbers. If I heard you correctly just now, and I just wanted you to clarify, obviously this is something that you and administration need to work on, not that we sort this out in this meeting. I'm asking for clarity just to make sure I'm hearing this. Could you explain to me how you get to the $1.90? You said $1.90 is the cost.
So that has nothing to do with the amount of flow we're sending. That's just from Andy's worksheet here, based on the total built CCFs that you have, the total that you're processing, and then your operational costs for process. So the total that you're processing are 9,682,384 CCFs annually, and your operational costs, so running the plant itself, to process that is 18,397,911. So,
but I mean, Andy's low number is 336. Do you ascribe at least to that point of this?
So the 336 he's basing on is fully allocated cost. So that is the cost per CCF of treatment, not just of treatment, but your cost per CCF when you break that over your development services, management services, debt service. I do believe that he took out that is debt service only, or just the interest, not the principal balance on that, but outside of your principal balance.
But I guess I'm asking,
Costs there. So that's
sure, but do you ascribe that 336 is a fair base number?
I think it's an accurate number for what he's describing. If the question is if Arkoma were to be an equal partner for all of your costs except for the I&I that the Fort Smith I&I, not the Arkoma I&I, we're already a full partner on the Arkoma I&I. But if we were to take just the I&I portion out, because again, for our specific case, there is little to no I&I that you could reasonably expect to enter after the metering, just based on the routing, then that 336 would cover our share of all costs outside of that I&I. Yes.
I just want to ask if you'd clarified on the base. Thank you. I just wanted to establish that. Thank you.
Yes. Matt, you're good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you guys for being here and answer the questions and sharing some information. But I'm going to start out with what Director Kemp just spoke to a little while ago about, and we talked about showing a little bit of grace and understanding. My example previously at our study session was kind of situation with the EPA. Of course, we all know that they had come to an amount that they wanted us to pay, and we didn't want to put that burden, because we can't put that burden on our citizens to pay. So what do? We're in negotiation with the EPA, correct? So why would we think? I'll give you an opportunity, because I see the way you're looking at it.
Yeah.
So if we can't pay what they're asking, Arcoma's saying that they can't pay anything more than whatever that fixed number is. So in my opinion, we need to look at something a little bit more fair. And I know the word subsidize has come up plenty of times, and I don't care for it either. But don't want to consider us subsidizing our bedroom community. They have 617 citizens. We had talked about, it was talked about our people here in Fort Smith making a sacrifice, to pay our current rates. Our common customers are too. They are. And if we increase into a rate that they can't pay, that increase is even worse. It was said that we don't want to put that burden on our own people. So why would we put that same burden that we don't want on our people, on our neighbors? So we have to come up with some kind of agreement, in my opinion, that's going to get us the increase that we're looking for, but also consider the difference. We talked about the difference between wholesale and retail, I&I. The rate that is charged by the city for us is one rate, 8.79. Currently, Arcoma's is 2.63.
It's 269.
69. Okay. We came up with that calculation years ago for reasons to be considered. And those reasons, part of those, I'm sure, is the conversion and measurement, the I&I, other things that are taken into what we consider our rate. Management services, development, policy, administration, those things that they, in my opinion, don't need to pay. If we can't, we just can't ask them. We can't mandate them to have a cost that they cannot afford. In my opinion, we've come full circle. Previously at the other study session, the fire department at the firehouse on number 11, there was talk about, turning the water off or other measures. We don't want to turn the water off, and we want to take care of our neighbors. You know, now we're at least in discussion with getting some kind of common ground. That's what we need to keep working on. And in my opinion, you know, I think one of the directors just said is that Director Kelp just spoke to is the 3.36 manageable? Is it fair? And I believe the remark was that you could work with that. You know, if this document is what was worked on by the city, was just presented at our Coma today, you know, and you have had time to look at this, and that's what you are talking to us about this evening. This as presented is or is not something that our Coma can or cannot do.
Director Good, just to clarify, are you asking if the 336 as a rate is that the question?
Yes.
I believe that 336 would be a significant increase from where we're at now, and it would be a challenge.
Does that 3.36? But that does not include the 3.5% increase that we're talking about doing annually, correct?
The 336, if I understand correctly, that is based on the 2024 number, and that is without an I&I adjustment, but does include the total of, you know, and to your point, you mentioned you believe that management services and administrative services should not be included in that is included in 336. So just to clarify that point, if I could see to Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Go ahead.
I think I can clear that up pretty easily by giving you a real example that I think would be easy to understand with just a little bit of math.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have 617 customers, right?
Okay.
If those were 617 Fort Smith customers, they would be billed for their average CCF use, 5 CCFs, right?
Yes, sir.
Wherever you use the water, they'd be billed by the water.
Right.
I think she's just comparing 5 CS for them and 5 CS for us. Go ahead.
Right. So 617 times 5 times 875 for your rate, right?
Okay.
And let's go times 12 because we're a full year. Does that make sense?
Where'd you get the 617 from?
That's our number of customers. So our total number of customers is 617 times 5 for average number times 875 times 12. That would be $323,925. All right? Easy math. Just multiply those numbers together, right?
Can you say that again, please? What number?
$323,925.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, we know how many CCFs of wastewater we send Fort Smith. Last year, we sent 122,848 CCF. Okay? So the easy math, 122,848 times 3.26 would be 400,000.
Where'd you get the 3.26?
That's if we were charged by 3.326. Right.
You mean 3.36? 336 is what they're asking. So you clarify that to 336.
I'm sorry, 336. That would be $412,000. $412,769.28. So there's a conversion ratio. It's not really 1-to-1. And us paying 326 means we're paying $89,000 more for the same number of customers as what Fort Smith would pay.
And still having to maintain that system. Mixing the math right there.
What's that?
I think you're mixing the math there to tell a story.
Okay.
We got you very well there. I mean, it's pretty basic.
Can we explain that? Because I'm not catching on to it, but I am understanding that the numbers are different. So
he's mixing two different ways of looking at it to get two different numbers.
are you just talking about the actual? Can I ask a question too?
75 to 10, you take the 875 out, the 336 on mesh to net there.
I think another thing I wanted to ask on this discussion, if I could, to administration is, and to Director Good and those that have been here for years serving so faithfully here, when we offered the agreement to the city of Arcoma for the $2.69,
2013.
what was the city of Fort Smith resident paying? Was it equal at the time?
It was slightly above, maybe.
It was considerably.
No, it wasn't. Because remember, you get the 167
Less,
it's going to be around.
Well, yeah, what was the Fort Smith when we offered a $2.69 wholesale rate? What was the city resident paying at the time?
And you're paying $2.69 now.
Currently, we're paying two.
And you
In 2013, it was $1.02.
is $1.02.
Yes, it's been increased. In I believe 2015 and 2017. If I recall.
Because I think the only reason I bring that up is as a factor in the context. You know, it's not that one party's seeking to be unfair. It's that one party had to rescope in light of circumstances, and therefore, any customer of ours, whether they're citizens or not, are going to have to rescope by being attached to this business. But the other thought, a reason why I'm asking where we ascribe to, you know, I know you're talking about administration. Should it be considered in here? If we take it away, we conceivably couldn't offer the service. So I understand that there's should we factor that or not factor that? But that is the entity that is actually able to provide it. And so for me, it's a false start. If I take that out, then I'm automatically starting on a false start, because if I take that away, then I might be hindering services to my residents that I need to take care of, because that's actually what the entity needs to operate.
I can appreciate that. I'm not arguing that those are not all important and necessary costs. My clarification was, if we look at the incremental difference, again, the cost of providing Arcoma, specifically the service, versus if Arcoma was sending no flow, that's the one that I wanted to make sure that we were, because I do believe in, providing, it being a good customer. And I think part of being a good customer is making sure that we're paying more than it's costing to have us. And that's where the 190 versus the 269 clarified that for me, that yes, it cost you system-wide $1.90 per CCF to process stripping out your overhead. Cost you $1.90 per CCF to process each CCF that we send you. We're paying you $2.78.
And I think that's where the first branch in the roadway is, because if I've understood the correct work here, that what it's costing us is $3.36. Because I can't just take it where you meter us. I got to take it all the way to the plant.
Well, again, the 336 is factoring in your other fixed costs. That's and Andy can correct me.
Lance, do you have the number down too?
If I misspeak.
Oh, okay. You look like you had an answer.
So based on the numbers we have in front of us, you can call it what you want. I'll call it a subsidy. We've been subsidizing Arcoma for years.
Well, I think the agreement that was there was a bad agreement. I agree with you on the sense that when we had to adjust, the city of Fort Smith had to adjust, we should have adjusted accordingly. But that's why I wanted to ask, what was the Fort Smith resident paying? Because, offering $2.69 feels, and I'm charging a Fort Smith resident $8.75. That's a huge difference. And how do you get there? It needs to make sense to me logically. I mean, it feels way off.
It didn't start there.
And I think that different parts. Sorry, I'm sorry, Director. I didn't mean to speak over you.
I also think
the example that Mr. Weatherford was trying to provide is that if we looked at charging our customers that same $8.75 rate for what they're using, we would, to equality for residences, if we're talking about the quality for the citizens from one to the next, if we set a rate to charge that customer $8.75 and took out all of our other costs, just you would receive less than what you are under the current agreement. That goes back to the difference in metering, and I know that
So help me understand that, if I could, because I want you to continue on it. If what you're saying then is true, why not just take the $8.75? I know that's not what you're saying, so help me understand that, because it sounds as if you're saying do it
on the same basis. If we paid you $8.75 per CCF that our resident used, but I don't think that it's the best way to draft a contract, but that's the difference, and that's what several times the question has been asked: what's the difference between a citizen of Fort Smith and a citizen of Arcoma? that they are all our citizens collectively. That there is a difference between a citizen of Fort Smith and the municipality of Arcoma. I think that is something that continues to get lost in the weeds.
So you're not lobbying that you're not advocating that are you saying the 875 rate, if we just charge you straight out like we would a resident customer, you're saying you would pay us less?
I'm saying that if we paid you $8.75 for each CCF that our customers use for water, so if we took just like you do for your customers, if we took our water bills for our customers, which average between about 1.8 2 million gallons a month, if we took that and paid you $8.75 per CCF, we would pay you less than we're paying you now, because we're paying you $269 based on the outflow meter, including all.
So you're saying your I&I comes in and drives that price up,
just right
versus based on what you consuming. Okay. The hard part of that would be that you're then asking us to take on the covering your I&I costs, or you see it differently?
Well, that is the reason that we're metered, so that you don't have to do that. And that is where, for example, at the 278, we're paying you for not only everything our customer uses, but any I&I that ends up in there, which is just like for you guys, is a significant amount. It is a factor in how we have to set our rates for our customers. But you are capturing every bit of that in your rate.
I see now. I'm understanding your point of view. Finally, I'm catching. If I'm going to summarize, make sure I'm understanding. What you're saying is, because we meter right at the end, we get all of your I&I, and there's nothing it's all factored there.
Right.
But your usage is so much less. Is that correct?
Our bill,
but our bill, you're being billed similar for the full I&I.
Right, similar to the rates that you've got here that Andy's worked for you with the $8.75 for your customers, billed water usage to sewer conversion versus what it is even fully allocated at your pump stations. Your treatment stations. Your numbers are from $8.75 to that equates to $3.36 per CCF that you're treating because of the difference in your I&I. It's the same differential in calculation that we're talking about.
Why don't you all get together?
Can I say?
Yes, go ahead, Brexit.
I'll just go on the board this. There are 12 pieces of property that are not inside the city of Fort Smith that they pay the $8.75 for the sewer. If you come up with a wholesale rate different than the $8.75, those 12 properties will ask for that rate because they're not in the city. And then if you're big industries that are inside the city, you might request to go be detached from the city so you can get that cheaper rate. Just remember that our citizens are paying the brunt of the bill here. Every citizen is less than 1% if we want to go down that road. But collectively, we're all a city. So my warning to the board is this: you go to a cheaper rate. There come the citizens and businesses asking for that cheaper rate because they're not in the city, or they're on those outskirts of the city, and they'll say, I want to detach from the city so I can get the cheaper rate. I can think of one business already that's not in the city of Fort Smith on Zero Street that has a lot of people there and uses a lot of sewer.
So answer from that point of perspective, help me understand. What they're saying, though, is that they have a meter that we know exactly, so that there's no ambiguity there about the usage.
There are people in the city that have meters currently today that we build on the meter.
Okay.
Because their businesses are used, because part of the product is used for water, and they build the meter. And they're the city of Fort Smith. And if you give a cheaper rate, you're going to say, why don't I detach from the city so I can get that cheaper wholesale rate?
And if I can speak to that, Director Settle, that falls to a class of customer, which is a well-established thing across the country. You set your customer classes, and that's something that you do at the pleasure of the administration or the board. I believe that any reasonable person would see a municipal customer as a different class than an industrial customer. That being said, you do have several industries that are metered at sewer. The reason for that is that their water usage is considerably higher than their sewer usage. And so that meter is there to make sure that you're not capturing water that returns, because it is used, as he spoke, in product production and other factors where it does not return back to your wastewater system. So your sewer meters for those industries, unlike for Arcoma, they are there to show the reduction in their water use versus their sewer use.
Lance, what do you have the answer there?
I don't want you stayed up all night. You stand. So this was passed in 2010 to go into effect, I believe, January 1 of 2011.
Which essentially means by next Tuesday, in terms of having an agreement for the board to consider. I think, yeah, I don't know that we're close there yet. I think we need to take some direction from the board as to what we do here. We either need some time, I think, to him. Well, that's we did the close to just in terms of getting my thought out. We need some time then to continue to refine what we work on with Arcoma, or we need to know if the board is willing to consider something different than what we've shown based on cost.
Okay, feel good. And what do you feel, Carl?
What do you think? 2 more weeks, guys, would help or no?
I mean, as far as working with, and I do want to clarify that working with your staff, they've been more than accommodating. As he's mentioned, we have some differences in methodology, but every meeting has been cordial and I believe productive. I do think that Tuesday is coming up very quickly, and I don't feel that we're as close as I would like to be for something that's coming a week from now. I believe if I can clarify, your regular board meetings are every other Tuesday.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So the next one, we skip the parish.
So it'd be
July the 8th would be the next one after next week.
Would that work for? So you would not have one on the first, you said?
That's correct.
I don't understand why we can't get this figured out in a timely manner. I mean, the numbers aren't changing.
I mean, I think that you bring up a good point. What are we asking administration to do?
I'm the one that mentioned 21 days. I'd like to stick to the 21 days. I really do think, to even to your point, a decision with deliberation and discussion has happened. A decision should be made, and then that allows them to work on a plan B. It work on whatever is going to happen next. But the process, I would rather just stick to the same timeline that was agreed upon at 21 days.
So does that mean we put on the agenda for, next Tuesday, the 875 rate, and hash it out there, be done with it?
I think we permit them to talk with administration on whatever they want to counter, and then a proposal or agreement is proposed by administration.
Wait. Are we asking for them to negotiate?
yes.
We're asking. So you're asking for them to negotiate
Yeah, they would be. Yeah,
on top of what we've already done.
Well, I think you give two proposals. I think there should be the option, the two paths that we talked about, which would be it stays as it is, or at first hearing, if they have a proposal of an agreement that administration hears out in their perspective. I think delineate the point of tasking administration was that they could get into the nuanced details of this and come up to something that was agreeable by Lance and Andy and our resident professional experts versus along their system. And then if we as a board want to hear that, or if we want to reject that.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing is negotiate down. Negotiate against ourselves.
I'm saying negotiate what is fair. That's where I'm at.
What?
I just wanted to hear a negotiation of what was fair. It sounds as if what I have in front of me is a proposal that isn't 875, but is what Andy and Lance thought was fair.
Right. But I'm hearing continue negotiate, which that would suggest.
I'm just
Bring
giving
that down.
space for it's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just giving space for it.
Vice Mayor Rutherford, did you finish giving your example of your figures?
Yes, I'd love to. So, like I said, if we just compare apples to apples, how did your people are billed? If our 617 people were in Fort Smith, there's no doubt they would pay 875, right? Correct. Or CCF of water use. Times that by 5, times that by 12, by the 617, right? That is $323,925. That's real simple math, right? If our residents were residents of Fort Smith, that's what they would pay, right? Can we all agree on that?
Break that down to payment again per month per resident.
He's just simply saying, if I could, if you take out their I&I, that is being metered, that's what it is. It's
Right? If our citizens were citizens of Fort Smith, that's what they'd pay, right? Correct. Now, if we change that, let's go with just our rate that we pay right now, $269. Okay? We can all agree to that, right? That's what they'll. So, simple math, 122,848 CCFs. That's what we sent Fort Smith in 2024. Multiply that by 2.69. That's $330,461.12 we paid you last year. So that's more than what, after the raise, your citizens, if our citizens were in Fort Smith, what they would pay. There's a conversion ratio from how we are billed for CCFs of wastewater return to CCFs of clean water use. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
If I could, Director Martin, what I'm trying to avoid in this would be, if we just go in here and vote an 875 rate and just say this is the way it is, this gets litigated, and then you have cost. And if you could come to a fair discussion and an agreement and some sort of terms, you don't have that. And that's all I'm trying to create space for. I was just trying to find a way to come to, and this is what it did lead us to, I think, was the due diligence of this. I think that the question that they need to negotiate among themselves, and I'm not a sewage expert, so I'm just trying to give space for it, is this I&I situation that they're having to factor into the situation, and where does that look at? But that's all I want to do is create space for that.
And I think you did that. I think you did that with the 21-day thing. And
Which is why I say next Tuesday, let's move on.
Let's move on.
It does still give them space to talk. I'm not saying that we're not doing that, but I'm saying let's make a decision by next Tuesday.
Yeah, so what do we put on the agenda?
We will continue to have discussion with these fellows this week, and we will have a proposal or possibly two to choose from on the agenda for next week.
So that's our ask of administration, is to continue the talk. With that talk, not that you're making the recommendation, but you'll bring that discussion information to the board for us to vote on.
Yes.
I would agree with Director Kemp. I think it's in all of our best interest to not end up in litigation over, again, 1.27% of your total flow. I think it would be a silly thing for all of us, and I don't want to be there any more than any of you do.
Thank you for coming here.
Appreciate you all, Kip.
Thank you.
Where's the next closest sewer system to our company? Pecola.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's time to go to had that discussion. Have you reviewed the preliminary agenda? I think if so, it'll take 10 minutes and then we'll go to the citizen forum. So, in a bit? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 80, yeah. Sherry, how many sign-ups, Steve? 10. I know, Mike.
We're going to reconvene.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, this time we're going into the citizens forum.
All of us. Yes, they're all in. Place them back here. Dude. Full.
Madam Clerk.
Yes, we do have 4. The first is Andy Postrick, and each will have 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. My name's Andy Postrick. I love living in Fort Smith because of the skyline. I'm really upset that we lost part of our skyline recently, and that was the Bricktown Brewery sign. And I can't wait until that's rebuilt. I'm really thankful that the community came together to support all of those employees who displaced, and I can't wait to come back. So tonight, I was just going to report back to you guys about an event that I went to last week in Fayetteville called the Vulnerable Road Users Summit. That was put on by the Arkansas State Highway Police Association. There were people from all over the states of Arkansas and Missouri. You had elected officials. There were 4 mayors. You had lots of cops. It was like half cops. If you wanted to commit a crime on Tuesday of last week, that would have been the day to do it because they were all in Fayetteville with me. Then you also had like traffic engineers. You had mobility people. So it was a bunch of people all in one place to talk about the same thing that we're all passionate about, which is roadway safety. Oh, and then there were community advocates like me as well. So it was everybody all in one place. So I just wanted to share 2 of the big highlights that I thought would be worth bringing back to you. And the first one is maybe something that you guys were not aware of, but that is within this group of people, we have our own cliques and our own niches, our own areas of interest, and definitely our own differences of opinion. And so one thing that I encounter a lot when I talk about bicycle safety and roadway safety, people tend to put me in a lane that I'm definitely not in. I don't know if you guys have talked with me before about this, but I mean, I've come up here twice and advocated against pedestrian bridges over certain roadways. I've done that twice with y'all. So it's not one brush paints all. But we were all in the same room together, and we were all trying to accomplish the same goal, and we can all get along with each other. One other example of that came up that I want you guys to be aware of is right now there's this idea that the safest place for a pedestrian to cross the roadway is in a marked crosswalk at an intersection. And myself, I disagree with that. It's actually a mid-block crossing is going to be much safer. The road is more narrow there. You can see the traffic only coming from 2 directions. So that was something that we very politely argued about, and I really enjoyed that. And you guys should know, like, there's new science coming out, and there's still disagreements. Like, the science that existed in the late 90s is different than the science now because we have smartphones. Everybody's driving around with a smartphone. So the science has changed about how people drive. We have e-bikes now. So those are things that are constantly evolving in this space. And the other highlight that I had was there was a conference with the 4 mayors of Fayetteville, Bentonville, Rogers, and Springdale. And somebody asked them a question, which was like, what advice do you guys have for other cities? So I would take it for a grain of salt because I think that those 4 towns are a little bit overrated, especially when it comes to like traffic safety. But I did end up agreeing with their advice. And I just wanted to share with you those 5 points. The 3 of them, Fort Smith is already doing. And then the 2 other pieces that I think we could start doing are really good ideas. So the first bullet point was their advice was that cities should aggressively pursue grants, which I think we're doing. And then we talked about a grants policy tonight. So that's good. Number 2 was data collection. So that means like having an accident reconstruction team, which Fort Smith does. So that's good. Number 3 is having a safety action plan, which y'all just passed last year. So that is good. And then number 4 is something that we've never talked about before. And I hope I'm not running out of time, but I'd like to introduce you to a concept called tactical urbanism. So when we talk about like a mobility plan and the trails plan, people think that we just drew this map out and that we're going to go out and build all these lanes. But that's not how tactical urbanism approaches safety improvements, that map doesn't show where people are walking or how many people are walking there. So tactical urbanism is an idea of addressing where people are struggling the most, and then instead of just going out and build something, work with the community, the people who actually live there, get volunteers out. Instead of sending your streets department with thousands of dollars of equipment and installing all new infrastructure, have volunteers go out there with traffic cones and flower pots and chalk and test something out before we dedicate resources towards building new infrastructure. And if it doesn't work, maybe a new crosswalk that we put in makes traffic worse, we can pull it right back. And it was essentially free. And so they recommended that cities have a tactical urbanism policy. And I think that's something that we should look into in the coming years. And you will be presented that idea eventually, I'm sure, because it is very much in the zeitgeist. We would be on the forefront, but other cities are starting to do it.
Abigail, 5 minutes.
May I have just my last bullet point? All right. And the last one was a mobility plan, which we kind of left that in the dust last year, but I think that's something that we need to discuss again. And instead of making it such an aspirational thing, it was very positive and uplifting. If we can do it, maybe just focus on the idea like this is a safety code that keeps people safe. We're not going out to build all this stuff, but here's the areas of the city that we have identified that are dangerous. And that could be the focus of this plan. So that is all. Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Cadelli.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there it is. I'll put thing there. Yes, yeah.
Next, we have Joy McCutcheon.
Joy McCutcheon, Fort Smith. The Fort Smith National Historic Site is really a treasure in Fort Smith, and I think it's in jeopardy. In the 2026 proposed budget, it calls for defunding 370 national park sites. And
Federal budget.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a quote in there that says the National Park Service responsibilities include a large number of sites that are not national parks. Many receives a small number of local visitors, better categorized and managed as state local level parks. There's an urgent need to transfer to the state management level, and I think I've talked to some folks in this space, and they are concerned about what's going to happen potentially with our Fort Smith National Historic Site. So I would just ask the board to, we talked about relationships earlier, that we start talking to our federal people and our state people. I mean, if it is going to be shoved down to the state level, we need to make sure that we protect the Fort Smith National Historic Site. The other treasure I think we have in Fort Smith is Oak Cemetery. And I think I owe a lot of gratitude and kudos to the Parks and Recreation Department, who have really done a great job. I think this board was instrumental in that at one point. It was really grown up, and there were dilapidated tombstones, and I think that the board kind of got involved in that. And administration got involved, and there were really significant improvements. And I think there's going to be improvements. I think the retaining wall. So I'm really pleased about that. I have a brother-in-law that was buried out there recently. Coach Rowland who was instrumental in my life, was buried out there. But we have a history of past generations also. 28 outlaws hanged by Judge Isaac Parker, have 100 marshals, deputies, court officials who served justice, just like Bass Reeves. We have founders. The founder of Fort Smith is buried out there, John Rogers. We have an Arkansas governor, Fishback, who was buried out there. 15 mayors, 122 Confederate soldiers, and the in the Confederate part of the cemetery. And I'd like to ask the board to consider, because I think it is a treasure, and I think we can continue and to improve it, because it needs to be a destination point, in my opinion, because there's so much history out there. And I would ask the board and administration to consider every other board member meeting, maybe honoring one of these people in our history out there, whether it's the governor, whether it's one of the marshals, maybe a current figure. But I think it would help keep our history alive, because Fort Smith is rich in history, and we need to keep that. The other thing, I'm glad to see a grant policy. I think that we did have some contentious times last year. Brian Westney filed a lawsuit, which is still being considered as to whether Carl Gethin acted ultra-virously. I think Judge Madness will have a decision recently, but I think this will help with transparency in terms of grants, and I think the board needs to be involved in an early phase on that. The last thing I would just throw out, Rick Lawley, was he forced to retire? And what was involved in that process. I think people need to know that. Thank you for giving me a few minutes.
Thank you.
Then last we have Joe Elskin.
I've spoken with you all before about this. Sorry to be dragging your meeting on. Because of the flooding in my neighborhood that is now fixed, I'm aware of the fact that construction companies will clear cut the land that they buy before they even know what they're going to do with it. And I know I don't have an incentive to stop them. I've spoken with them about it, and they'll say, well, that's what the owner wants, but they're cutting before they have an owner, before they have a project in most cases. So I was wondering if there's any brainstorming that can happen about maybe some sort of official statement or notice from the city that they're cutting the properties that they acquire, before they even have a plan for it, or before they have a definite buyer or investment in it, a specific investment, because that clear cutting creates flooding and it creates urban heat areas. So, I mean, you just think about walking down Phoenix Avenue, that huge long sidewalk, there's not a tree there at all. And so if they hadn't clear cut that, there would be trees, there would be shade trees, and it wouldn't look, it wouldn't be such a hot spot. Anyway, thank you for what you do. Make a miracle happen.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Joe. To adjourn.
No.
Thank God.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Thank you.
And let's go, Christine. No, nothing for us. We'll see you today.